There have been rumors over the last few days of the Calgary Flames potentially trading away Swedish defenseman Rasmus Andersson, but only at the right price. Now, there's been rumors that he wants, a possible change of scenery. Calgary is trying to figure out what they want to do with him and, what team is willing to go to their asking price. Well, if there's one team in particular that could go to Calgary's asking price, that would be the Carolina Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. On the Thursday edition of the pod, we're going to be looking at why the Calgary Flames might be trading Rasmus Andersson and why a lot of teams, including the Hurricanes, would be interested in the 28-year-old Swede. That being said, what could possible trade packages like that could potentially give the Hurricanes a chance to get a guy like Andersson if they are willing to go for him, which I think they should. And let's say they do make a trade, and whatever that trade package is, where would he fit into the lineup for the Carolina Hurricanes? Obviously on the blue, but where specifically? Well, starting off, let's look at the Flames situation as a whole. As of currently, they do have 21 of 23 roster spots already taken up. In terms of standard contracts, you're allowed to have 50. They have 33. And as of right now, the cap going up to $95.5 million, Calgary sits at $25.17 million in cap and a ton of draft picks over the next 3 drafts. They have 2 first-rounders in this upcoming draft, which we talked about earlier this week, 2 first-rounders in 2026, and 2 third-rounders in that same draft as well. Only the 4th round of this 2025 draft is the only round they don't have a draft pick. They have picks everywhere else. The Flames have a boatload of picks. Now, looking at the roster, they have 12 forwards already currently signed to make it $50.125 million or 52.5% of the cap, with some couple UFAs, couple RFAs, and all that stuff. Looking at the defense, their defense is only making $16.705 million, which is only 17.5% of the cap, and their goaltending only making 1.625 or 1.7% of the cap. Of course, that's what the fact you're looking at Dustin Wolf and Devin Cooley being their tandem, because Dan Vladar right now is currently a UFA, and he might not be coming back to Calgary. But looking at the defense, you got Mackenzie Weegar making 6.25. Rasmus Andersson is making $4.55 million. Jake Bean 1.75. Dame Miro Manov 1.25. Braden Poschel 1.187. Then you got Zane Parekh on an ELC making $942,500, and then Ilya Solovov making $775,000. The crazy part is, though, he will be a UFA Group 6 after this upcoming season, this is when a contract ends with restricted free agent status, that a player becomes a Group 6 UFA if several conditions are met. But we're here to talk about Rasmus Andersson. Now, Andersson's on a very friendly team deal. He's a right defenseman who's 20 years old. And that the thing is, there has been rumors going around that Andersson possibly wants to change, and that Calgary is thinking about moving on from him, or there's a lot of possibilities here for the Flames. There is they want to trade him, but when do they want to trade him? Is it now, or do they trade him at the deadline and let the season play out and go from there? Or this is the other option they really don't want to do, is just to let him walk in free agency next summer and get nothing back for him, which is probably the worst case scenario for the Flames, is just going and trading, letting the guy just play the season out and letting him walk for nothing. Now, you could trade him at the deadline because they're going to be a team who can be really desperate to get him, but where's the value at that point? Because you don't know how the season's playing out. You can be in a situation where you're so far out of the playoffs that, what, and plus, how is his season going to be too? If, could you be losing more in the trade if you wait for the deadline, or if you go trade him now this offseason where his value is really high and, there's a lot of teams that are interested in him, like the Blue Jackets, I've heard Carolina might be interested. There's a bunch of teams that would be interested in Andersson. So if you're looking at that type of aspect, this is what you're getting from Andersson. Like I said, he's a great all-around defenseman. A lot of people like this guy. Like I said, he's only 28. He's going to be 29 after this upcoming offseason, making $4.55 million. That is a very team-friendly cap right there. And the Malmo Swede is looking to potentially get his payday, and his agent's, funny enough, Claude Lemieux, which a lot of Hurricanes fans definitely know who that is because the fact that they had his kid on the roster. Now, Andersson last year, 11 goals, 31 points in 81 games, was a .38 points per game average. The thing is, he had a minus 38 last year, which I wouldn't really consider putting on him since Calgary overall, which is a very dysfunctional team last year. And that was his worst ever plus minus. But you look at 21-22, where the Flames are really kicking in full cylinders, he was a plus 30 at the year with 50 points. So his points have dwindled from 50 to 49 to 39, 31. But I look at that more as of this is a Calgary Flames problem more than a him problem when it comes to that. The thing, too, is, though, he averaged 23 minutes and 59 seconds last year on the Flames, where the season before, 23:50. The season before that, 24:05. You look at the 22-23 season. So Andersson over the last 3 seasons has been very close to averaging over almost 24 minutes a game over the last 3 seasons. So that's why a lot of teams like him, because the fact that he can play a lot of minutes. And while Carolina doesn't really play their defensemen that much, having a guy like Andersson would be a great boost. If you're looking at, hey, we got Jacob Slavin. He's going to start his 8-year contract this upcoming season. He starts with that. We got Sean Walker for another 4 years. We got Chatfield and Ghost for another 2. Let's see where they go from there. And then you got into the last years of Morrow and Nikishin before they get their contracts as well. Of course, both of them are going to be RFAs after next year. But, yeah, could you run with that 6? Yeah, possibly. But if you think Morrow needs more time in Chicago, which I kind of believe he should. I mean, he's still young. You don't need to rush him right away. But if you go get a guy like Andersson and pick him up, and there's a possible extension there of, do you give him right around Slavin's 7? Like, so you trade for him and then extend him later on. Could you give him a 7 or 8 year deal? I think you could. I think you definitely give it to a guy like Andersson. And it wouldn't be that much money because, like I said, he's already making 4.55. Even if you go up to 6 or 7 or even 8, you're still putting yourself in a good spot. And now you locked up your top pairing of Slavin and Andersson for a long time. Of course, we'll talk more about that later on. But if you have the opportunity to go get a guy like Andersson, and I've definitely asked around to some of my colleagues at the Hockey Writers and other people who've covered the Flames of what a potential asking price would be for an Andersson, I think that the Hurricanes would really benefit for getting a guy like him because, like I said, he's a right shot, right defenseman. He's 28 years old, so he fits into even the older part of the core of Slavin, who's right around that same age of 29, 30. You got Aho's 26. You got Walker's up there. Ghost is up there too. There's you and your Svechnikov's not that far behind either. And then of course you got all the younger guys. So Andersson would be a great fit. And like I said, if you go and give him the right asking price to the Flames and give him an extension, you're setting yourself into having a really good top pair for the next at least half a decade. So that being said, what could a possible trade package look like to get a defenseman like Rasmus Andersson? Well, stick around and I'll talk about that here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked on Hurricanes. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And it's really easy, especially if you're sharing finances with someone, because Monarch helps you find a way to stay on the same page with the person you're sharing accounts with. So, that being said, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked on Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about why the Flames might trade Rasmus Andersson for the fact that Andersson wants a change of scenery, and the Flames have to figure out, do they want to let him play out his year out, but then lose him at free agency for nothing, or do they trade him now or trade him at the deadline? And I think for them, if they're looking for the best package, now this offseason is the time to do it. So that being said, what could a possible trade package look like to get Andersson? So over at the Hockey Writers, I did ask my colleagues who cover the Flames. I said, hey guys, what is a ask that the Flames could be looking at in terms of for a guy like Andersson? And all of them came back to me and said it would be a high prospect and or high draft picks to get Andersson. And I'm like, if it's just a high-end prospects and or draft picks, I think the Hurricanes have put themselves in a good spot where they could definitely do that. Because here's the thing, like I said, you look at where the Calgary Flames sit in terms of their draft capital. They have 2 first-rounders, a second, a third, a fifth, sixth, and seventh in this upcoming draft. Then almost the exact same thing, but you add another third in the fourth in the 26th draft, and they have 1 pick in every round in the 27 draft. So that being said, why would they want more draft capital? Well, I think it's because of the fact that you look at their prospect depth, it's nowhere near where the Hurricanes are at. And that's the crazy thing too, is because, yeah, they got, Jacob Battaglia, who I really wanted last year in the draft. But then you look past that, it's kind of, it's okay-ish, but nothing to really write home about if you're looking at a lot of guys and who you really could bring up in terms of making things happen. And that even said that you have a bunch of former names you've probably heard of that are going to be UFAs. Jared Tenorti, Tyson Berry, stuff like that. They even have Martin Frk, former Hurricane, for a game. But then you look at the rest of the team, it's like, it's okay, but it's not that great. So that being said, could the Hurricanes be in a position where it's like, hey, we have guys to give you. We have draft picks to possibly give you as well. And if it's just a high prospect and a high draft pick, I don't see why you want to go make that move to the Carolina Hurricanes. And that being said, what would a high prospect or a high draft pick be? Well, I'm thinking if you're going to go trade Rasmus Andersson, because they do have Ilya Solovov, which I said they do have. They also got Zane Parekh, who they drafted last year. They also have Brandon Paschal and all those guys, but most of the defensemen, 24, 25, 27, 28, 31. Zane Parekh is the only guy under 20 on that team. They also have Kevin Ball, who they got from the New Jersey Devils in the Jacob Markstrom trade. He's 24. Then you look at the rest of the defensive core. They got guys, a bunch of them in their 20s, 23, 22, and stuff like that. But if we're looking at, okay, who can we possibly trade here back to Calgary, who could possibly be on that list? Now, you could say, could it be a Scott Morrow? I am prospect ELC. Could he be a potential option for the Hurricanes to trade? I would say it wouldn't. If the Flames are willing to take on, getting a high-end prospect back, Morrow is definitely a top 5 prospect on the Carolina Hurricanes, and someone who I could definitely see them possibly getting rid of, if you're looking at terms of getting rid of defensemen. Because after that, it's like, maybe Anthony Honka, Dominic Fensore, Ronan Seeley. Those guys are all about 24 to 22. Do you look at a Alexei Himosami who's 22, or Dominic Bendica who's 19, Charles Alexis Legault who's 21? There's a lot of right shot defensemen in the Hurricane system that they could easily just go be like, oh, hey, we got a plethora of these guys. They're all within 19 to 22. What if we just trade one of them off and give them some draft picks, and then there you go, you got Rasmus Andersson. Now, could you give them a goalie? Maybe, but like I said, they already have Wolf and Cooley, and there's some other guys as well that are kind of okay. But is it a Yanov Peretz or an Nikita Kwapu they just signed for 1 year? Or is it a Ruslan Kayasev? Who really knows? Could you possibly trade them a forward? Yeah. Justin Robidas, maybe. Gleb Triksov. Hey, I know Felix Unger-Storm's name has been kind of mentioned in possible, mock trade packages. Is Felix Unger-Storm one of those guys? Or could it be a Jackson Blake? Because Calgary, for the most part, does need some scoring as well, and that Jackson Blake can score the puck. He can score goals. Because you look at a lot of their forwards, they are outside of maybe, Dryden Hunt is 29, Jessica Kirkland's 28, Martin Prospel's 24, who they just signed. A lot of the other guys in their 30s. Ryan Lomberg, Mikhail Backlund, Blake Coleman, Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau, and Huberdeau still, his contract goes to 2031, where he's making $10.5 million. Oof, Maroon's that contract. So could a Jackson Blake be a potential option? Maybe. But if they think that if they want to get a defenseman back, the Hurricanes have a lot of defensemen that they can willingly go give up. That might be considered high end. Is it Dominic Bendica? Is it a Charles Alexis Legault? Is it a Scott Morrow? Potentially. Now they get high end draft picks. Are you talking 2025 first? I mean, hey, the Hurricanes are drafting 29th. Calgary has 2 picks in the first round. Hey, it's like, hey, if you guys want a third pick in the first round, here you go. I would willingly give up that first round pick in 25 to go get Rasmus Andersson. Because at least you're getting your defenseman on that right side right now, and your defense looks pretty dang good by just doing that. If you're adding a first and a high-end prospect, that's all it takes. Or is it a high-end prospect and 2 draft picks? Okay, here's a 2026 first and a 26 third? Or however you want to play that out. There's potential there. Like I said, the Hurricanes have 21 draft picks. They got 2 firsts next year. They got 2 firsts in 28. Like I said, they could give up their 2025 first right now, and they're not even no one would blink at it. Yeah, you won't have a pick until the 3rd round, but at that point, it doesn't really matter because your cupboard's already full of a lot of good prospects. But now you can go get Rasmus Andersson, who's 28, on a very team-friendly deal that you can still go sign other guys, go trade for other guys, because he's only taken like a tad over $4.5 million of your cap. Even with the signing of Eric Robinson, you're still in a really great spot if you're Carolina in terms of your entire cap space, where you currently sit at $26.715 million. Now I have to remind myself it's at 28.4, it's 26.715. But even then, getting Rasmus Andersson's 4.55, you're looking at what, 21 million and some change? You can still go get other guys if you really wanted to. So if it does cost a Jackson Blake or a Scott Morrow or a Charles Alexis Legault or a Dominic Bendica in like a first and a third, or a second and a third, or however you want to do it, the Hurricanes have the prospects. The Hurricanes have the draft picks. If that's all Calgary's looking at as high-end prospects, like your top 5, top 10 prospects and high-end draft picks, I'd say go do it. It makes sense. You have a plethora of all of that. And you got the cap space. You can easily trade away a prospect's ELC and pick up $4.55 million of Rasmus Andersson, and then you can potentially extend him. And you lock him up for 5 to 7 years. Possibly 8 because the fact you're going to own his contract. Maybe you get that secret, maybe you get that lucrative 8th year. Who knows? But it makes sense. You have all the necessary things that Calgary look at because, like I said, the Flames guys are talking about that's what the asking price is probably going to be. High-end prospects and or high-end draft picks. There you go. You got both. Go use them. So let's say the Hurricanes do trade for Rasmus Andersson. Where does he fit in the Hurricanes roster? Stick around and we'll talk about it here in a second on the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis. Maybe even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rouget Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. You can even read real customer reviews on their site, and it's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. If traditional options also haven't worked, well, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head on over to Rugiet.com/LockedOnAHL and use code LockedOnAHL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnAHL and use promo code LockedOnAHL for 15% off. Individual rates may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet's website for full safety information. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about why the Flames might be trading Rasmus Andersson, what possible trade packages could look like for the Hurricanes to go get Rasmus Andersson. Let's say they do. Let's say they get the trade done. Let's say it's a Jackson Blake or Scott Morrow and some draft picks. Where does Andersson fit within the Hurricanes? Let's say it's Scott Morrow. Let's say, hey, Scott, we love you. You're a great player, but we have a bunch of other right shot defensemen. The Flames really want you, and we want to go get Andersson. This is how it's going to work out. Let's say it's Scott Morrow and some picks for Rasmus Andersson. Okay, so that being said, what does the roster look like with Andersson in it? Well, obviously your top defensive pairing is going to be Jacob Slavin and Rasmus Andersson. Okay, that is a huge upgrade. Definitely a lot younger than Brent Burns. Nothing against Brent, but Father Time definitely caught up to him, and the fact that he was dealing with it, and getting surgery last season, so it did slow him down a little bit. Plus, played a lot more minutes than he's used to. But you get Andersson, who's used to playing almost 24 minutes a night. Now you got him slotted next to Jacob Slavin. Fantastic. There's your top pairing. Slavin Andersson, left shot, left D, right shot, right D. Boom, bang, boom. There you go. You possibly sign Andersson to a 5 to 8 year contract. There you go. Now you got your top defensive pair locked up for at least a half a decade, maybe more, in those two guys. Then you're looking at Nikishin Chatfield. I can dig it. Nikishin's very offensively minded. Chatfield does have some good offense to his game, but he's got the speed that can play a definite two-way, which we saw a lot of. So that'd be a great fit. And then you got Gostisbehere Walker as your third pair still, or potentially your 2B pair to the 2A of Nikishin and Chatfield. We know how good Ghost and Walker were together. There you go. There's your 6. And then you possibly bring back Ty Smith or Riley Stillman as your 7th defenseman. And there you go. There's your entire blue line for next season, at least. And if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, if you go trade for Andersson, like I said, you got Slavin Andersson, Nikishin Chatfield, Gostisbehere Walker, and then either Ty Smith or Riley Stillman as your 7th defenseman. How could you could not be upset with that defensive group? I would be totally fine with that. It's the group. If it's Scott Morrow being traded or if it's another defenseman, and let's say Scott Morrow is in Chicago next year. Maybe it's someone else. Who knows? But we know it's going to be a high-end prospect. Let's say Morrow. If it's Morrow, he's on the roster. If it's not Morrow, then he's in Chicago. But regardless, you get a massive upgrade on your blue line with getting Andersson. A great overall, all-around game for him. He's got offense. He's got the defense. Yes, the plus-minus last year wasn't great, but it was an overall Flames issue, not a him problem. But you can definitely tell that he's got the points. He has what it takes to put the necessary points for a defenseman and play a long set of minutes in the game. Of course, the Hurricanes don't play like that. They're not going to play their defensemen 24, 25 minutes a night. You're looking at probably 20, 21, maybe 22. So Andersson would definitely be a lot, more fresh. And he's not going to get used as much. Like him and Weegar got used a ton last year for the Flames. So let's say Andersson comes to Carolina. Well, he's not going to be used very much. Like in terms of logging minutes, he's not going to be doing almost 24 minutes a game. But you're on the defensive top pair with the best defensive defenseman in the NHL and Jacob Slavin. And if the Hurricanes really wanted to, they could throw you on a power play unit and or a PK unit. There's nothing wrong with it. You're going to get your ice time. Brad Brittamore will give you your time as long as you're doing what it takes to play like a Carolina Hurricane, which I think Andersson will be a great fit on the Hurricanes for just the system, the way he plays his game. Great two-way. All-around game is fantastic. And like I said, you put him on the top D pair, you put him on either the first or the second power play unit, depending on what you really want to do there. And then you throw him on one of the PK units. There you go. You got your 5-on-5 and multiple special team positions for Andersson. And he's not going to get dogged for 23 to 24 minutes a night. He might have 21 or 22. He's never going to be fresh, and he's going to be on a contender where he knows that he's got Jacob Slavin on his left side, and he doesn't have to worry as much. He's not going to have to worry about getting a minus 38 on his plus-minus rating. He can go and do his thing. He can be almost the plus 30 guy that we saw 3 seasons ago, if you really wanted to be, or at least be somewhere in the 10s, in the teen range. But regardless, getting Andersson for me would be a great step up and a great step forward for the Hurricanes, because you're going to get a guy who's established in Andersson. He's 28. He's a right shot, right defenseman, plays a great game, would fit the system perfectly for the Hurricanes, and you're pairing him with Jacob Slavin, and you're putting him on the special teams on power play and or PK. That would be a huge win. And the fact, too, is $4.55 million of cap. That is so very team-friendly that even with the cap going up to 95.5, that gives you at least $21 million to go make other moves. And even with the cap going up to 104 or more next offseason, you could still go give Andersson an extension. You can lock him up for at least another 5 years or another 7 if you want to keep him aligned with the Slavin contract. Then you have your top D pair for at least half a decade. That would be a huge win for the Hurricanes. And if it's just a high-end prospect and a draft pick or two, you have all that. Your prospect pool is deep. One of the deepest. It's a top 5 depth, prospect pool in the league, and you got 21 draft picks. Yeah, I know Calgary's got a lot more than Carolina, but Carolina doesn't need all those picks. Do we need a lot more prospects that we're going to have to wait around for and be even more log jammed? I don't think so. If you got him, go trade it for Andersson. It just makes sense. Team-friendly deal, fits the system, top pair, give him an extension. You can pretty much put him on any, special teams on 5-on-5. And there you go. And it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. So if I'm the Canes, I go make that move. But if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments. What would you trade for Rasmus Andersson from Calgary if you even want Andersson? So let me know in the comments what you think. But for me, you got the cap, you got the draft capital, you got the prospects. Go make a move for Andersson. Lock him up and have your top D pair be Slavin and Andersson for at least the next half decade. But I guess we'll see what happens with that. However, this will be a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL podcast where there is no off season. We will be bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can find my link tree in my bios, to where you can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. you also want to check out my other podcasts. It's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs so they become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Thursday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.